Hello, and welcome to Bird and Sky's Insights and Philosophical Explorations. We are going to continue exploring Charlotte Wood's The Self and Its Problems, the Blavatsky Lecture, 1919. And this was published in 1922 through the Theosophical Society. And we continue with her telling us that the analogy of the sphere is further suggestive of expansion, which is at the same time limitation. By this symbol, we typify reality as appertaining to an interior level of being, typified by the movement of the sphere walls into externalized reality, thus expanding outward from a dimensionless order into a state which is limited by dimension and categorical modes. Goethe terms this as the acceptance of a limit for the purpose of wider self-realization. Limitation for a better understanding. And the interesting thing about limitation for expanded growth is that it forces you to rethink things. Now, as you can tell from the background here, I am somewhat of an artist. And this particular one is pastel, but I do have others that are oil paintings. And in my oil painting, I use a limited palette. Mostly it is the primary colors of red, blue, yellow. And I have a few additional colors to enhance them, which is yellow ochre, alizarin red, and of course white and black, which are not colors. They are tones. And from that limited palette, I can achieve virtually any color that I am seeking to mimic. Even with this pastel here, I do the same thing, except instead of blending the colors, I overlay them so that you get the illusion of the browns here, the dark brown, and the lighter brown. So, limitations does have its advantages. And within the mind is the internal reality. We essentially live in our minds. Yes, we are awake and we see you're watching this video, but while you are watching this video, your mind is thinking. And through that thinking, it connects dots, or reference points, as I like to call them. Old ideas with new ideas. And this internal reality of ours seems to be limitless. Of course, Clint Eastwood in his Dirty Harry series had a wonderful line for that, which is that we are all legends in our own mind, meaning that there are no limitations in here. We can virtually see a palace balanced atop a slender steeple. However, our mind is free of constrictions, but we do not grow without limitation. Therefore, we do not grow or progress within our internal reality. The external reality is abundant with limitations, and it is through those limitations of this external reality, this common reality that we have, that we actually grow. And in order to grow, to understand, to comprehend the divine, we must accept the limitations of this outer or external reality. Because we have credited the divine with the ability to create, and because we have infused the divine with that ability, we too must create. After all, we call ourselves children of the divine, children of God. Therefore, children tend to first mimic and then grow into their parents. We shape our external reality according to the designs of our internal reality. And if we are to progress as nature has intended for us to progress, we must follow that process, which is a continuous process. Every time we begin something new, it first begins as an idea in here, and then it begins to emerge or to manifest into the external reality. And because the external reality has limitations, we must adjust what is being manifested from our internal reality to the confines of the external reality. That is how we grow. However you see yourself, you consciously or unconsciously shape the world that is around you by the people you interact with, by the places that you go, by the videos that you watch, the books that you read, the games you play. All of that and more goes into shaping your particular reality. So, you must mold your reality within these limitations, and you must learn to operate within these confines, and through these confines, through our adaptations and such, to move in the direction we desire to move into, we begin to understand ourselves. We begin to understand how we think, why we do the things that we do, what causes us to become upset. We learn all of this through operating within the confines of this reality. And as you begin to understand yourself, you begin to understand those around you. And as you begin to understand those around you, you begin to understand the divine. And you discover that the divine, Allah, God, Jesus, are all limited by your ability to create. Now, this suggests that how the divine is viewed by the majority is flawed. The divine that is flawed, or perhaps it is you that is flawed, but it is not in both cases. The divine is not flawed, and neither are you flawed. It is your interpretation. It is how you choose to interpret yourself and the divine that is flawed. We tend to infuse the divine with human attributes. And it is those very human attributes that are also limiting. However, if we accept those attributes and we shape those attributes, we in turn begin to shape the reality that is around us. We begin to shape our external reality. Because where does the divine dwell? Within. The divine is the development, the expansion of your consciousness. And as your consciousness, your awareness begins to expand, so does your interpretation and understanding of the divine. In the sphere is the point. We've gone over this before. And this point, this point within the sphere, it shuts off indefinite universality of the all consciousness and acquires clear individuality. The sphere is the point developed from pure intermediateness into concrete and specific being. In a word, selfhood. You. Without form, there can be no self-realization. Do not confuse indefinite universality with the realm of spirit, because spirit also has form and must conform to the natural principles that exist in that format. Therefore, spirit is not necessarily free to do all that we imagine it to do. It is only free to do what is within its confines, just as you and I are free to do whatever falls within our confines or the confines of our reality. Our reality is fraught with limits. Those in the spirit realm have their limitations as well, because their reality has limits. We grow because of limits. Nature, however, may not have limits, but nature may be what creates those limits. Just a little something to contemplate. So the point is the distraction that prevents us from progressing beyond an indefinite state of being. We cannot withdraw from the external reality because nature has put us here. Nature, no matter how we try to dominate her, always points out the folly of mankind. That's a quote from Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla. Nature shapes us according to our perceptions. Nature shapes us. Nature is all around us. And we don't shape ourselves. We influence nature, and nature obliges us. Nature is without judgment. Nature is willing to fulfill all of our desires, whether we realize those desires or not, whether they are beneficial or detrimental. Nature provides us with the building blocks to create our reality, and she shapes it. The point is pure indeterminateness, meaning the point is pure potential. The point is potential. What resides within our minds, within here, is our potential. We possess the potential to add to the structure of humanity in the same way we possess the potential to take away from the structure of humanity. Meaning that we have the ability to influence humanity or to harm humanity. And most of us are of the opinion that it takes one person to create these huge, grandiose events, and through these huge, grandiose events, we change the world. No, it doesn't happen that way. We can use Jesus as an example. Jesus did not change the world. The world did not change through one person. It sounds good, it's good advertising, good propaganda, but it is utterly false. Jesus provided the tools for his followers, and the only followers we tend to recognize are the ones identified as his disciples. However, if you look at Acts, when one of the disciples was killed, stoned, they replaced that disciple from one of the other followers. So all the disciples were just part of his inner circle. And to be honest, his inner circle could have been larger than that, but in the development of Christianity, they like to tie all these things together, make them nice and neat so they flow. 12 tribes of Jerusalem, or the Jews, 12 tribes of the Hebrews, there we go. 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 disciples, 12 apostles. You know, to be honest, we don't know how many were there. But Jesus provided the tools, and everyone around Jesus helped to reshape the world. And they didn't do it by spreading his teachings. They did it by spreading their interpretation of his teachings. Therefore, what little bit you do influences those around you, and then those around you influence those around them, and then it works as a ripple. That's how the world changes, through a ripple effect. You are merely a pebble dropped into a pond. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing to be ashamed of. Your little contribution can be just exactly what is needed to create something larger than yourself. And isn't that why we seek the divine? To connect with something larger than ourselves? So we possess the potential to add to the structure of humanity in the same way we possess the potential to take away from the structure of humanity. And it is the application of our potential which is the determining level of our self-realization, and in consequence the awareness of the influences we exert intentionally and unintentionally upon others. That is what we are aspiring to when we follow a path of spiritual teachings, is to understand how we influence those around us for the better and for the worse, because it is our intention that makes the difference. And we cannot be responsible for how they interpret our teachings. I cannot be responsible for how you choose to interpret and apply the teachings that I am sharing. I cannot be responsible for that. That is your responsibility for that, because you may interpret them different from what I intended. However, if I pay attention to the words that I use, the way I phrase them and such, I can influence others in a way that may be beneficial to themselves and in turn to the rest of humanity. To grasp this principle without confusing the point with its manifestations, we must realize there is one universal monad, or one whom and to whom and through whom are all things that make up the sum total of being. One monad, innumerable personae, aspects, expressions, held in manifestation by one will. One unity possessing many personalities, many aspects, many expressions, held together, the reality, the external reality, by one will. Of course, we would like to call this God. However, there is the whole of nature, which encompasses all that has ever and presently is and will ever exist. The whole of nature, all that exists, is a singular aspect or manifestation of the whole of nature. The trees we see is just a singular aspect, a single manifestation of nature. The pet that you may be stroking is merely one singular aspect of nature, of all of nature. All that exists is traced back to nature. It's natural. For us to exist in this form is natural. For us to leave this form for another form is natural. For us to move into the spirit realm is natural. Therefore, nature must also extend into the spirit realm, not separate, but part of a whole. The whole. All that exists is traced back to nature, the very nature we deny and seek to dominate. Consider what is called climate change. We influence that. Yet we deny our influence. We had nothing to do with that. That's just part of nature. It's the way nature is. No way could we have contributed to that. Wrong. Our very existence contributes to that. All that we do contributes to nature, contributes to nature's development, continues to influence nature's decay. Because you can't create nature, you cannot destroy nature. You can only influence it in one fashion or the other. In essence, what many lovingly and dismissingly refer to as God, Allah, or any other name of the Creator, is nature. If we could comprehend that, if we could see that, not that nature is an expression of God, but that God is nature, perhaps we might be better stewards of what we have been given to care for. Not to keep, not to dominate, but to care for. Just a little something for you to contemplate. I can't give you this all at once because it was a pretty big chapter and there's lots of information here. So we spoon feed it a little bit at a time. And we happen to close this with, there is the whole of nature, which encompasses all that has ever, that is and will ever exist. All that exists is a singular aspect or manifestation of the whole of nature. All that exists, all that we see and comprehend, is but a small piece of the whole of nature. All that exists, AI, your computer, your credit card, your vehicle, all of that can be traced back to nature. The very nature we deny and seek to dominate is, in essence, what we lovingly and dismissingly refer to as God, Allah, and any other name of the Creator, Source, Divine, Absolute, the unnameable, the unmanifested. It is that. I want to thank you for stopping by and listening to what I have to say. I hope this was useful. I hope you can thread this together with other spiritual teachings that are out there. And if you enjoyed this, take a moment, subscribe, or at least hop in periodically to the channel. Thank you very much, and you have a fantastic day.